Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Men of the Scarlet and Gray Live. As always, your host, Josh Schott. Our ninth episode now. We're really rolling with these podcasts now. Thank you, everybody out there listening. We always get great feedback from you guys, and looking to have another great show as always. First, introduce all the guys on the show. Shannon, the always controversial Shannon Sommers. You can follow him on Twitter at SMSOMMERS84. Shannon, how you doing today?
Doing great. It's Rutgers week.
Yes, it is. Looking forward to seizing up our new opponent in the Big Ten. And Chip, you can follow him on Twitter at Chip Minnich. I got that right this week, right, Chip?
Yeah, you did. Absolutely.
Yes. Yes, I messed up last week. I apologize for that, Chip. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. And as Shannon said, it is Rutgers week, and I guess we'll have a better understanding of what that will be like at the conclusion of Saturday afternoon.
Absolutely. And Andrew, you can follow him on Twitter at Bucknut22. Andrew, how you doing today?
Hey guys, how we doing? Looking forward to Rutgers week, off the bye week, so looking forward to some Buckeye football.
Oh yeah, and our final Minnesota Scarlet Gray Raider. It's his first podcast of the season, so give him a big welcome. Nate Burns, who you can follow on Twitter at SC_Bucks. Nate, welcome to Minnesota Scarlet Gray Live, and how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Glad to be here.
Well, we're glad to have you, Nate. It's going to be a great show. We're going to talk about all kinds of stuff here this week. Of course, the Buckeyes are coming off a bye. Last weekend, we had a great show, of course, with our special guest, Joe Dexter. We love having him on. We hope to have him on in future podcasts again. First, we're going to take a look at how the Big Ten did the past weekend here. And it was an interesting slate of games. Michigan State beat Purdue 45-31. Sparty, they kind of had a struggle with Boilermakers. Boilermakers put a pretty good fight with them, but in the end, they were able to put them away. Iowa beat Indiana 45-29. The Hawkeyes had a rare explosion of offense. I couldn't believe how many points they actually scored. In one quarter, they actually had 28 points in the first quarter. Minnesota beat Northwestern 24-17. That was actually a pretty big game for the Big Ten West is concerned. Golden Gophers are looking like a pretty solid team out in that division. Wisconsin's beat Illinois 38-28. The Badgers continue to puzzle me with the way they're playing, struggling against an Illini team that's just not very good at all. And, of course, Michigan, they finally get a win by beating another bad team in Penn State 18-13. That was a pretty ugly game. But what's your guys' thoughts on that slate of Big Ten games this past week? And we'll start with you, Shannon.
Pretty ugly game. That was the ugliest game I've ever seen in my life, and I've watched a lot of Browns games. I think that set the record for the most 3-and-outs ever.
I warned everybody.
Oh my Lord, that was But hey, we got to see the third string quarterback for Michigan.
Bellamy?
Yeah, that was awesome. No, but Purdue, you got to tip your hat to Purdue. Like Chip and I have been saying all season long, everybody's saying, Purdue's, bottom of the basement, but they're getting better and better. They gave Michigan State the run for their money, and Michigan State needed that interception for a touchdown in order to put them away at the end there. Shows that Sparty's got some holes there, and I'm really looking forward to that November 8th game.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's one thing about Sparty is I've noticed this pattern is they play hard for 3 quarters and they tend to give up in the 4th quarter, and that's an interesting trend to keep an eye on heading into the game against the Buckeyes as that continues because that could cost them in the long run. Nate, what did you think of the Big Ten slate of games?
Well, I think Michigan State, struggled towards the end of the game, and I think that's definitely, like you said, trying to look into. But I'm hoping Urban looks at that tape with a team like Purdue that ever put up 31 points on them. That makes me pretty happy into the future. I think you can be able to put a lot more points on them than 31 if Purdue can do that.
Yeah, I see the Buckeye offense. If Purdue can get 31 on the board against the Spartans' defense, I don't see how the Buckeyes have any problem at least putting that up against your thoughts on the Big Ten games this past weekend?
Well, I think
Sorry, Chip. You go ahead, Chip.
Okay. What I was going to say is I think Wisconsin, they're just going to continue to feature Melvin Gordon no matter who the quarterback is. And as far as Illinois, I think Tim Beckman, I mean, their season's going downhill fast. We've been talking for the last several podcasts how Tim Beckman's going to probably be out of a job by season's end. With Indiana, unfortunately, with the loss of Nate Sudfeld, I think their season, the possibility of a bowl might be in jeopardy. Minnesota Northwestern, I think that looked like a tough game. I know we'll talk about Ohio State in greater detail, but Josh, we've been kind of back and forth on Twitter. That November 15th game is looking more and more difficult, and again, I think as far as Penn State and Michigan, how ugly that was in so many respects, but Penn State's offensive line, we discussed it, and I'm sure we'll talk about it in greater detail next week, but they can't protect Christian Hackenberg, and I think Ohio State's going to thrash both Penn State and Michigan when they play those teams later this season.
Yeah, Penn State's offensive line is just pathetic. I mean, Michigan was poking holes, and their defense is horrible. I mean, I don't know what. I'm afraid Joey Bosa's got to kill a couple offensive linemen on the Nittany Lions the way he's playing. Andrew, would you your thoughts on Michigan's first win, the rest of the Big Ten games?
Oh yeah, well, Michigan needed that win, especially a home night game. But I thought Northwestern was gonna go out and beat Minnesota, but Minnesota looks like a really good team, handing Northwestern their first Big Ten loss, and Northwestern was coming off a couple good games, and it was nice to see Purdue able to put up 31 points on Michigan State. I mean, that just makes me feel so much better on the November 8th game, but we can't really look ahead because Minnesota isn't going to be a walkthrough, so.
No, it certainly isn't. I was going to ask you, that was a good segue into what I was going to ask you guys next. Do you think Minnesota is really the favorite in the Big Ten West right now? Because I know Nebraska looks on paper to be the favorite, but I really think Minnesota's got a great shot at the West. If you guys want to chime in on that.
I agree. I mean,
Definitely.
they're looking really good. I mean, Cobb's looking like the real deal as a running back, and their defense, they're playing some pretty good defense, and it looks like their toughest opponent right now is going to be Nebraska and Iowa. I mean, you don't know what you're going to get with Iowa. Like you were saying, that offensive explosion, don't know where that came from because they haven't been able to score much all season. But it's I think Nebraska is going to be their biggest competition. I mean, you would think Wisconsin would be, but maybe Wisconsin will figure their quarterback situation out this week with the bye week. But yeah, I think they're in the driver's seat right now.
It's interesting about Minnesota. I'm looking at the stats here against Northwestern, and Northwestern actually had more total yards than the Golden Gophers. Northwestern had 393 total yards, while Minnesota had 274. So it's interesting the way they're winning these football games. Obviously, their only loss of the year was TCU, which that's looking like a pretty good loss right now with the way TCU's playing. You guys, any more thoughts on on Minnesota and the Big Ten West?
Well, I mean, we discussed it.
Running back.
Well, what I was going to say is we discussed it earlier. I think Minnesota, they're not flashy. They're not going to be the most exciting pick, but they're fundamentally sound. They're physical on both lines of scrimmage. It's not inconceivable that Minnesota may only have one loss when Ohio State travels to Minneapolis on November 15th. So that game is just looming larger and larger, and considering the fact how emotionally invested Ohio State will be when they play Michigan State. That is definitely shaping up as a possible trap game for Ohio State. So just for any Buckeye fans that listen to this podcast, just be aware, going to Minnesota is not necessarily going to be the easiest game that Ohio State will have this season.
Yeah, me and you were discussing that. I originally said it was before the Michigan State game, but it's after. That's a trap game that worries me. I'm really worried about that game. Of course, the Buckeyes will probably have an even better idea of what they're going to, the kind of team they're like this year when we reach that game. But right now, I have to ask you guys your predictions for the Big Ten championship game. If you had to predict who today would be making the Big Ten championship game, who would be the two teams? We'll start with you, Andrew.
Ooh, tough question. Right now, I'm gonna go with Ohio State and Minnesota. At this point in the season, Ohio State and Minnesota.
Chip, what do you think?
I'm gonna get the wrath of my fellow podcasters as well as from the site. I'm highly skeptical of Ohio State until they slay the demon. I have to go with Michigan State from the East, and I think in a rematch it'll be Nebraska from the West.
Nate, what do you think? Who do you think would your predictions for the Big Ten championship?
I got Ohio State and Nebraska. I think Pelini has them in the right direction.
Shannon, who do you think makes the Big Ten title game at this point?
Oh, I hate right now that I have to agree with Chip, but it's not that
how horrible of a thing that is.
I didn't mean it to come out that I hate to have to agree with Chip. I hate that I had the same feelings as Chip as far as that I had the same concerns that he has, that there's the doubt that I have with the Buckeyes. That, there's certain things about Ohio State that, we have to slay the demon before we could, put ourselves in that situation.
I don't know. I know for the Big Ten West right now, I would have to go with Minnesota because Nebraska, I don't have any faith in their defense. And the offense is basically a one-trick pony with Abdullah. So if you shut down Abdullah, you pretty much shut down the Huskers' offense. So I'd have to go with Minnesota in the West right now. In the East, I don't know. I'm torn. I really can't give you a winner who I think would win the East right now because on one hand, I think Ohio State has enough offense they could beat Michigan State. But at the same time, I don't know if we've even seen the best Michigan State's had to offer yet. So I'm torn. I could see where you guys are going, each of your directions. So that's why they play the games, as they say. So we'll when we reach that matchup with the Sparty, we'll definitely have an idea if the Buckeyes or Spartans are going to go to the Big Ten championship game, hopefully. So
could I interject one quick comment about Nebraska and Minnesota? Is a moment ago we were talking about how Ohio State goes to Minnesota November 15th. That keep in mind the Minnesota game. That actually Nebraska they will actually have Minnesota coming to them. November 21st. Or I should say November 22nd. But the point being is I think both teams, regardless of whether we're talking Nebraska, Minnesota, I think any team from the West, and we even talked about it in the preseason, there's kind of running that gauntlet at the end of this, like the Nebraska-Iowa game on Black Friday. I think there's going to be so many games at the tail end of November that are going to truly identify the champion for the Big Ten West Division.
Yeah, the West, to me, Wisconsin even could still win the West, but by the way I feel and the sounds of you guys, Wisconsin, I don't think either of you guys sound like you have very much confidence in the Badgers winning that. winning the Big Ten West.
No. It's going to be interesting to see how it plays out.
Yeah, that's for sure. So moving on now, we're going to take a look at the topic I put in the rundown. Of course, we're going to take a look at who you guys think are the best 4 teams in the country right now, and who would you put in the playoffs if you were in the playoff committee's shoes? Who would the 4 teams you put in? So we'll start with you, Shannon. Who do you think would be the who would you put in the 4 teams in the playoffs at this moment? And based on what you keep, like not just what you see at the moment, but looking down the road, who do you think is going to last out their schedule and make it?
Well, right now, if Mississippi State, if they went out, you got to go with Mississippi State and put them in there, obviously, because they like you tweeted out after that game, they're playing like the best team in the country. Unfortunately, I mean, I don't know. Like we said before the podcast started, I'm kind of rooting for Florida State to beat Notre Dame because I think the whole Jameis Winston thing's going to blow up, so it's going to knock them out. So I'm hoping that the winner of the Ohio State Michigan State is going to propel a Big Ten team into there. I'm thinking possibly Baylor, or maybe, because maybe a Big 12 team, Baylor, maybe Oklahoma. And I'm not sure for the 4th team right now. I'm really not sure.
That's what I'm hearing for a lot of people right now is they can get 3 teams, but the 4th team they're always torn on. Chip, who would you have who are the 4 teams you'd have in right now?
If the season were to end today, that's the key. Season were to end today, I'd go with Mississippi State as they just defeated an Auburn team that I believe to be the best team up until last weekend, and Mississippi State handled them. The winner of this weekend, or let me rephrase this, the winner of Florida State Notre Dame will probably be in good shape to run the table and make the playoffs. Ole Miss, their defensive line may be the best in the country, so they could be in there. So that Ole Miss Mississippi State game at the end of the season should be something Thanksgiving weekend. And even with the struggle versus Purdue, Michigan State really impresses me. I think, again, Michigan State, Ohio State, that November 8th game may allow the winner of that game to be in good standing to be the 4th team in the playoff. But make no mistake about it, any Big Ten team to make it, they have to win out from here on out. When I'm talking about Michigan State and Ohio State, and they have to hope for a lot of help. They have to hope that a lot of the teams in the SEC and the Pac-12 and the Big 12, that they all cannibalize themselves so that at least they only have the 1 loss, because the national media is going to be harping on and on about how the SEC deserves to have 2 teams in that playoff.
Yeah, but here's the thing. It doesn't matter what the national media says. And if I'm not mistaken, you have to win. You have to win your conference. So,
No,
I mean,
they don't actually.
I do believe that part of the thing is that they want a conference championship team
It's a
in the
strong
playoffs.
consideration.
It's not. Unfortunately, it's not, because that was what Mark D'Antonio, Michigan State, said that he believes that they should, but it is the 4 most deserving, and that's why it's such a subjective mess. If they had said at the beginning that if you need to be a conference champion, then I'd feel a lot more confident about a Big Ten team. But I can assure you, as well as everyone else that's listening to this podcast, it has nothing to do with conference championships. It has everything to do with what is considered to be the most deserving. So that's why those committee members are going to truly, they're going to have to stand and take the arrows and the shots from fans like us, because why was Michigan State or Ohio State excluded at the expense of two SEC teams? So trust me, it has nothing to do with the conference championship.
Well, here from the college football playoff site, it says the best four teams. The selection committee will choose the four teams for the playoffs based on strength of schedule, head-to-head results, comparison of results against common opponents, championships won, and other factors.
Right.
So I don't think that even if a Big Ten team winning a championship with one loss should get excluded over, SEC, that didn't win a championship.
I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm merely pointing out that let me put it to you this way. How and again, I don't want to stir up a hornet's nest here, but something that Kirk Herbstreit said a couple weeks ago that I think is a really good point is the problem with the Big Ten is, for example, Michigan State and Ohio State, we're talking all about can't wait till that November 8th game. Can't wait, like Michigan State, Ohio State, who's going to win, all this stuff that we're talking about. The problem with that is the rest of the country is by and large every weekend, and be fair, every weekend within the SEC you have games that are comparable in terms of scope, and in the Big 12, I might add, that are comparable in scope in terms of the national narrative that are just as compelling as the November 8th game of Ohio State at Michigan State. Think about it. I mean, when you think about, you had a couple weeks ago, you had Mississippi defeat Alabama, and you had Mississippi State defeat Texas A&M, and you had TCU defeat Oklahoma, and then you had this past weekend, you had Baylor defeat TCU. I mean, like, those games are just as big in the national narrative, but we have to wait until November 8th, and all these other conferences are having that. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is that Ohio State and Michigan State, the best that they can do is I think they not only have to win out, but they have to believe that all these other teams are going to be cannibalizing each other, and I believe that if there's going to be a Big Ten team, it's going to be the fourth seed in the 14 playoff.
Well, let me play devil's advocate with you. I agree with your points, but don't you believe some of the SEC teams were overranked? I mean, you look at South Carolina, they were ranked preseason top 10, and they are definitely not a top 25 team even. Texas A&M basically got ranked as high as they did because based off their win over an overrated South Carolina team. So was Texas A&M really a good team after all? And Missouri, of course, is another team. Do you believe the SEC bias causing this overranking maybe kind of makes the SEC? I mean, I'm not saying the SEC isn't a good conference. They're the best conference right now, but don't you believe they're a little overhyped due to that preseason rankings being overrated?
Sure, I would agree completely with. And if you recall, one of my pet peeves from several podcasts ago, and I made that point, and I'll just reiterate it, is I'm not a big believer in any kind of preseason poll, because until you actually see teams play, how do you know truly which are the best teams? Now, again, I'm speaking to you from Ohio, and obviously I'm biased for not only Ohio State, but just Ohio high school football in general. One of the things that I've always been a big advocate of, and I don't want to steer this conversation in a completely different direction than you were intending, is one of the things that I love about Ohio high school football is the fact that to get into the state playoff system, it's all computer ranking. It's all based on strength of schedule. Because there were times in the past where you could be a 10-0 high school team, and if you didn't play anyone worthy, you didn't get into the state playoffs. The Jeff Sagarin, who does the computer rankings for USA Today, even though they lost the other day, he still has Auburn ranked number 1 based on strength of schedule. And keep in mind, not only has Auburn played some good teams and they lost to Mississippi State, but who did they lose? Who did they travel and defeat? They went to Kansas State, played them, defeated them. I think it truly to make it an unbiased system, you have to do it completely based off of strength of schedule.
I agree with that, and I was reading an article actually on this today. I want to get your guys' thoughts on this. I guess when looking at the strength of schedule, they don't consider margin of victory, which I think it should be considered. And on top of that, I guess they get a sheet. If I remember this article correctly, it was on SB Nation. Bill Conley wrote the article. And I believe they get a sheet, and it shows them their wins and losses, whether it's against the above 500 or below 500. And basically, from what I gathered, a win over a 7-5 team basically is looked at in the same way as a win over like a 9-win team. And I don't agree with that, obviously.
That's interesting.
I don't remember exactly. You guys have to look for on SB Nation. But there's concerns about them not looking at the right stats when determining these Final Four teams.
Right. Well,
They were
go ahead,
talking.
Andrew.
They were this afternoon. They were talking on Big Ten Live, and I believe the committee did like a rehearsal from the 2008 season and how they would have graded the teams. And I forgot who was talking, but I believe he was saying that like the voters, all these different voters are having like different views on how they're grading teams. Like some of them consider the winning a conference higher than how they handled a 5-loss team. Like I think all these voters have different values and like kind of like points on how they're grading these teams. It seems like it's not like a strict system, like where like they're considering the same things.
Well,
Yeah.
when does the our first picture of what the committee's actually looking at? When is their first, like, what is it, the poll or whatever?
In a couple weeks, they're going to release their top 25 poll.
Yeah,
Okay.
two weeks from today.
Okay.
Okay, that's good.
Because, I mean,
Yeah. Go ahead,
I mean,
Sean.
I know the AP poll doesn't mean anything, and like Chip was saying, the preseason poll, you know, it's all about, you know, popularity and all that kind of stuff. But I don't understand how, you know, like when Ohio State demolished Kent State 66-0 or whatever, that they move down in the polls, but then Alabama plays Arkansas and only wins by 1 point, and they stay the same. I don't understand. When's the last time Arkansas has won a conference game?
Well, no, wait a second. Arkansas actually, I think, is a fairly solid team. I'd make the argument that Arkansas they let the game against not only Alabama but also against Texas A&M the previous week slip through their fingers. I truly believe Arkansas. We like to make fun of Burt, and rightfully so, but I think Arkansas compared to compared to I'd say some of the, you know, like a team like, I don't know, like Illinois, like Indiana, like Iowa. I think Arkansas is a very physical team. That they're I'm not saying that they're great, but I think they're actually a little bit better. And you know, so I think that's kind of the problem, is that when you compare a win 1 point versus a 60+ point win, it really depends on who you're playing. I mean, you can't evaluate Kent State and Arkansas as the same.
Right, yeah, I'm not saying that Arkansas is as bad as Kent State. But, I mean, it's just when you look at a team and, yeah, Arkansas might be getting better, but when's the last time Arkansas has won a conference game?
They haven't under Burt.
That's, and that's those are some things to take into consideration.
Well, another thing too is I definitely know voters and Florida State fans make this argument. I see a lot is they've won 22 straight games. Well, when I'm looking at rankings for the 2014 season, all I'm looking at are the 2014 games. I could care less about what happened last season. I don't care. I'm looking at the current team, and I'm afraid voters are going to do that as well. Andrew, we never got your 4 teams who you think would be in the playoffs at the moment. What 4 teams would you choose?
At the moment, Definitely Mississippi State. Definitely Ole Miss. I'd go with Baylor. And you'd have to go Florida State as well, but that Notre Dame game this weekend is going to determine that. But I think throughout the whole season, everything's just gonna play out, and all these, I can't see the playoff picture having 2 or 3 undefeated teams with the matchups these teams still have to face. So I think everything will play out though.
Yeah, I think there'll be 2 lost teams in the mix for the 4th spot. That's how I think chaotic this season still has yet to go. There's a lot of games left to play, and I don't have 4 teams at the moment, but the 4 teams I would project at the end of the season, based on what I think is going to happen, I think Mississippi State is the class of the SEC. I think they're for real. I think they're going to go out and win the SEC. So I see them probably as the 1 seed at the end of the year. I think Baylor has a pretty manageable schedule from here on out. They still have to play Oklahoma. They still have to play Kansas State. So I think Baylor will be the 2 seed. This is just the moment what I've seen from teams. I put Auburn at number 3, even though they won't win their division. That's going to be, I think, the controversial thing. I think a second SEC team will make it, and yet that SEC team will probably come from the Big Ten West, even though they won't be obviously playing in the SEC championship game, because that would mean Mississippi State would win the West and win the SEC. But I think that's going to be the real controversy, is the second SEC team making it when they didn't even make their conference championship game. And the 4th seed, I think, is the winner of Ohio State, Michigan State. I think whoever wins that game and wins out will be at the 4th seed, basically by process of elimination. I think that's just what it's going to come down to.
Isn't this what makes college football so awesome?
It's great. This is awesome.
And people said the BCS taking it away would dampen the regular season. Has it really dampened the regular season? I think it's made it better.
I'm glad we're done with the BCS, because Ohio State dominated the BCS, so it's time for Ohio State to dominate something else.
It's exciting.
That it is. We'll definitely keep talking about this in future podcasts as the season unfolds. We're going to get to our national games now. Before we do that, if you don't mind, Sal, our special guest, is joining us, Sal Soothsayer for Rutgers. You mind picking some national games with us, Sal? Welcome to the show.
Sure. Thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it.
Hey, Sal. Thanks for joining.
How you doing, Sal?
Good, thanks. Good to talk to you. It's been twice in 1 week now for us.
I know.
Well,
All
Sal,
right.
for some of us, once a week is more than enough.
If you tell me once in a week is more than enough, Shannon, I'll have to trust you guys on that one.
Just kidding, Shannon.
Welcome to the show, Sal. We're going to get to our national games now. We're going to pick them, then we get to the Big Ten, then we'll preview Ohio State's matchup with Rutgers. First national game we'll take a look at is number 14, Kansas State, at number 11, Oklahoma. This is a big game as far as Big 12 race is concerned. Who do you guys like in this one, the Sooners or the Wildcats? We'll start with you, Shannon.
I'm rolling with the Sooners.
Sal?
Yeah, I like the Sooners, too. I had them preseason as one of the top 4 teams in the country, so I got to go with them at this point.
Chip?
I'm going to go with Kansas State. They had a bye week last weekend. Oklahoma coming off a shaky win over a very mediocre Texas team. So I'm going to take Kansas State to end Oklahoma's playoff hopes.
Andrew?
Both teams have one quality loss, but I'm going with Oklahoma.
Yeah, I'm going to go to Oklahoma. You guys will see in my weekly picks post tomorrow, I did really, really bad with my picks last week. It was my worst week yet, and so I'm going pretty conservative with my picks this week, although I picked a few upsets. But I'll take the Sooners here. I think the Wildcats have a shot, but I'll take the Sooners just because it's in Norman. So moving on, number 21, Texas A&M at number 7, Alabama. The Aggies, this is definitely a big game for them. They'll need to win this game to remain in the West conversation, as well as Alabama. the loser of this game is pretty much eliminated from the SEC West. So, Andrew, who do you like here, the Tide or the Aggies?
I'm going with the tie here.
Chip?
I'm not too impressed with the Aggies.
Yeah, I think Nick Saban, anyone who saw Nick Saban, I think that anger was palpable yesterday at his press conference. He's going to play the no respect card, have Alabama ready to roll Tide over Texas A&M.
Sal?
Yeah, it looks like it might be a sweep for us here. I agree with Chip and Andrew, though. I think Alabama's flat out the better team in this one. Texas A&M had a nice win early on, but I think Alabama's a better team.
Shannon?
Texas A&M let me down last week, so I'm going Alabama.
Yeah, I'm going to make it 5 in a row. I'm going to go with Alabama. Even though the away teams won the last 2 years in this matchup, I just don't have any faith in the Aggies, especially after, like Shannon, I picked them in the upset last week, which looked really dumb because Bo Walls killed their defense. But, yeah, I like the Tide in this one too. So moving on, another Big 12 matchup. Number 15, Oklahoma State at number 12, TCU. Oklahoma State, the Cowboys, they've been kind of under the radar ever since they lost to Florida State, but they're quietly a solid team this year. And, of course, TCU lost that fantastic shootout they had with Baylor. That was a really entertaining game to watch. The Horned Frogs or the Cowboys in this one, guys. We'll start with you, Chip.
Even with the painful loss to Baylor, I think Texas Christians should be able to rebound against an Oklahoma State that didn't play too well against a very, very bad Kansas team. So I'm taking Texas Christian.
Andrew?
Something here is telling me Oklahoma State's going to go on the road and pull this one off.
I like it. A bold upset pick. Sal, who do you like in this one, Okies or TCU?
Yeah, well, you're not going to be. I'm not going bold upset in this one. I kind of agree with Chip. It's hard to pick a team coming off of such an emotional loss, but I think TCU has proved they're the better team. I think they're going to rebound. The coaching's good enough; they can get them in the right place.
Shannon, who do you like?
Even though that TCU gave up more yardage than what Michigan and Penn State both had combined last week, I'm going to go with TCU.
Yeah, I don't know what to think of Oklahoma State yet. I haven't watched a lot of them outside of that Florida State game. I'm going to go TCU. I think the Horned Frogs are a dangerous team, and that loss to Baylor was unfortunate because I thought they were. They're one of the top teams in the country, and that loss may be what does them in terms of playoff implications. But I like TCU to get a big win here. So number 23, Stanford at number 17, Arizona State. The wacky Pac-12 Cards or the Sun Devils in this one. We'll start with you, Sal.
Yeah, I mean, the Pac-12, you might as well flip a coin at this point. I think I like Stanford, though. More balanced team, and that'll be enough.
Shannon?
I'm going to go with Arizona State.
Chip?
I agree with Sal. I think Stanford is not only a better team, but I think Stanford's defense is going to make the difference here.
Andrew?
I'm going to go with Stanford here as well.
I'm going to go Shannon on the limb on this one. I think Arizona State's got enough offense to put Stanford away. Stanford is that's another team that I just don't understand. I thought Washington State was going to score a boatload on them and not even be close, and then they end up turning around and putting 34 on Washington State and holding them to 17 last Friday night. So I don't know. If Stanford wins this one, I'll pick them in every single game from here on out. They prove me wrong again, but I'll take the Sun Devils in this one. Pac-12's nuts. I don't know who's going to come out of that scrap heap out there at West. So,
hey, keep beating each other up. Knock yourselves out of that playoff picture.
Fine with me.
I don't see a Pac-12 team in the playoffs, but who knows what's going to happen. College football is crazy, and you don't know what's going to happen. So the big game of the week, everyone's talking about national implications, of course. Number 5, Notre Dame, at number 2, Florida State. Maybe the final game ever for Jameis Winston as a Seminole with all the chaos going around him. By the way, you can send your hate mail to Shannon because he just did that, not me.
Send it. Send it
to Shannon. So who do you guys like in this top 5 matchup? The Fighting Irish or the Seminoles? We'll go with you, Andrew.
Florida State hasn't lost in so long, but and they're home. It's a night game. And Tallahassee. I have to pick the Seminoles here.
Chip, does Jameis go out a winner?
I think Jameis goes out a winner. Both teams are just cloaked in turmoil. I mean, Notre Dame with the suspended guys and Jameis, but I think Florida State, I think the home crowd and the team speed will be too much for Notre Dame.
There's controversy at Notre Dame.
Two fine, upstanding schools. Sal, who do you like in this one?
Yeah, I like Florida State too. Notre Dame, as usual, is overrated a little bit. And incredibly, Jameis Winston, for all of his idiotic, bonehead decisions off the field, it doesn't affect how he plays. Hasn't in 2 years. So I think he's going to give us another good game, and Florida State will pull it out.
Shannon, you got Seminoles too?
I'm going with my 2 birds, 1 stone. We're knocking 2 teams out of the national playoff picture in this one. I'm taking Florida State, and then after Florida State, Winston's getting suspended. They're going to find out that, they've been playing him dirty, and they're going to vacate the wins. Florida State's going to get knocked out. Notre Dame's going to get knocked out. It's going to open up the door.
I said I was going more conservative with my picks. I'm going to go fun here. I'm going to go with the fun pick. I'm going with Notre Dame in the upset because why the heck not? I mean, I don't know. Notre Dame's got a lot of talent. I think they'll focus on this game. They're going to really focus on this game. Golson's going to play the game of his life. I think the Fighting Irish knock off the Seminoles the old-fashioned way to knock them out of the national championship, and then Notre Dame will turn around and drop an egg to an inferior opponent later this season like Boston College to knock themselves out.
You're getting catfished.
I like the pick. I like the scenario.
I had to go with one bold upset, so I'll go with Notre Dame, I guess. I'm not very confident. I'm probably going to be wrong. You guys are going to be right. But
I like your second pick there, too. You've got Boston College. They'll get 6 wins, but they'll beat USC and Florida State. I like that for prediction, too. That's pretty bold.
Somebody's fake girlfriend's going to die.
Oh, gosh.
There's a shirt out there you can wear. It says, "Play like your fake girlfriend died today." And I got to get my hands on one of those shirts.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Never live it down.
No, they won't.
And I want to go on record that Mr. Gene Smith, we would have won the national championship if you would have just taken your self-imposed bowl ban in 2011. We'd have been playing Notre Dame, and we'd have been national championships in 2012.
Amen to that. Moving on to our Big Ten slate of games. First, we'll take a look at Iowa and Maryland, 2 teams that you never know what they're going to do when they hit the field. Both teams are capable of scoring a lot of points. Both teams are also laying eggs. Who do you guys like in this one, Terps or Hawkeyes? We'll start with you, Sal.
Yeah, I think I like Maryland this game. I think they can put up some points. Obviously you guys blew them out of the water, but I think you'd blow Iowa out of the water too.
Shannon, who do you like?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Maryland because, as Chip always says, Maryland's coming off of a bye, and I think Iowa used up all their points, so I'm going Maryland. Beat you to it, Chip.
Chip, your rebuttal to Shannon, and who you're picking.
I can't argue with such sound logic. A bye weekend and everything, but I actually want to give credit to Sal because I think Maryland offensively will be too much for Iowa to keep up with, so that's why I'm going to go with Maryland.
You like Maryland too, Andrew?
No, but I have to go with Iowa here. I'm going to be different. Yeah, I'm going with Iowa.
He's been with Iowa from the beginning.
Yeah, I have been this whole year.
He's sticking to his guns. I picked Iowa. I was the one who picked them last week, so it could turn out for you, Andrew, because I'm picking Maryland too. I just think Maryland's got too good of an offense, and they're coming off the bye, and they got a good offense. I think Maryland wins this one, but I could see Iowa doing it. I was right last week when everyone else was picking against them. I think Andrew could be right as well. So moving on, this one's actually more interesting than what I thought when you think preseason, but Purdue at Minnesota. Purdue has a shot at the upset here, guys, but do you think the Gophers roll in this one?
I do.
We'll start with you, Andrew.
Yeah, I mean Purdue is improving, but I think this weekend we really see that Minnesota is a pretty solid program, and I think they beat Purdue.
Chip?
Minnesota's just too strong offensively and defensively. I think Purdue is their improvement is visible, but it's just slow.
Sal?
Yeah, Minnesota got themselves a little bit on the Big Ten radar at this point. I think they're going to win this thing going away. I mean, I don't think it's going to be close in the second half.
If they're on the radar, then why do you have them last in your power poll?
Minnesota?
No, Purdue.
No, I'm sorry. I was saying Minnesota's on the radar now.
Oh.
You know, they've had a couple nice weeks in a row, getting a little bit of respect in the West.
Oh, I misheard you. I'm sorry.
But I'm impressed you knew my power poll that well. I appreciate that. That was pretty good.
Well, who's your pick in this one? I think I'll go with Minnesota. I don't see. I think Purdue puts up a valiant fight, but I agree with Sal. I think Minnesota puts it away going into the second half. So moving on to our next matchup, Michigan State at Indiana. Sparty's rolls in this one, right, guys?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, there's no question that one. Yeah, there's no question on that one.
Yeah. Yeah, Indiana, I just don't think they have enough in this one. I think Sparty rolled pretty easily, so we're pretty much consensus on that. So the final Big Ten matchup before we get to Ohio State Rutgers, number 19 Nebraska at Northwestern. This is kind of a toss-up because the last few years, if you guys been paying attention, this game usually comes down to the wire. I mean, last-second field goals, kickoff returns. I believe the last 3 games have been determined by 2 points or less. Who do you guys like in this one, Wildcats or Huskers? We'll start with you, Shannon.
I'm going to go with Nebraska on this one.
Sal?
I think that. Yeah,
you got it, Shannon.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with Shannon. I think Nebraska will intentionally try to really reestablish that run game, and it'll work.
Chip?
I agree. I think this is going to be a really Northwestern's improving, but Nebraska, I think, with Amir Abdullah, they're going to try to make a rebound statement after that loss to Michigan State a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, because isn't Nebraska coming off a bye?
They are.
I gotta take note. I didn't realize how big these buys were for you guys. I gotta make sure I know that's gonna come out.
No, just to clue you in, it's just I'm a big believer in getting plenty of sleep, man, getting plenty of rest. Mr. Sommers obviously does not share that sentiment. So.
Oh, I do.
Andrew, who do you like?
I think Nebraska bounces back off that. Michigan State lost pretty well, and they go on and beat Northwestern.
I was really tempted to pick the Wildcats in this one, but since they're coming off the ever so important bye, I'll take Nebraska. I think it'll be a close game, as it always is. It'll come down to a field goal or something like that. Bo Pelini always has to make it entertaining for everyone out there watching, so I'll take Nebraska. So that wraps up our Big Ten games, and now we're going to take a look at Rutgers and Ohio State. And Sal, I have to ask you, coming in this game, what do you think Rutgers has to do to pull off the upset?
Yeah, certainly Rutgers will need to do a lot to pull off the upset. Ohio State, to me, is maybe the most improved team in the country from week 1 to now. The keys for Rutgers, they have to win the turnover battle, and they're going to need something on special teams, which they've been known for, the special teams part. The turnover battle could be the concern because they haven't generated a lot of turnovers this year. For Rutgers to be in the game, I do think they're going to need a turnover, special teams, one of those kind of plays, and they're going to need to, their best, best characteristic of the team so far, I think, has been getting to the passer, and they're going to need to figure out some way to get to the passer and get a couple of big plays, sacks, tackles for loss, those kind of things.
Well, it's not going to be.
Go ahead, Shane.
I was going to say it's not going to be hard for them. I mean, that's the one concern that I have with Rutgers is it's not going to be hard for them. my concern is with Ohio State's offensive line still, kind of gelling, and Rutgers is third in the nation in sacks and first in the Big Ten with sacks. That kind of, I'm a little leery about that.
Yeah, I'm a little leery about that as well. And I'd like to ask you about the flip side of the ball with James out at running back. How much has that hurt the Rutgers offense?
Yeah, it does. Paul James has been one of the more underrated running backs in the country the past couple of years. He's had injuries that have been unfortunate. Last year he was leading the nation in rushing through 3 weeks. Had an undisclosed lower body injury. Kyle Flood subscribes to the Bill Belichick approach of lower body, upper body injuries. But he had a leg injury which kept him out for about 4 weeks, and really was never quite the same when he came back. The two guys who have been filling in, Justin Goodwin and Desmond Peoples, have done a nice job, but they were better as a complementary back, not as the workhorse. Against Navy, Rutgers was able to use those two guys and still establish the run and run the ball well, but Navy's certainly not the same team as Ohio State or certainly as Michigan's defensive front seven either, and they struggled to run the ball against Michigan. I think obviously a lot of credit has gone to Ralph Friedgen, the new offensive coordinator at Rutgers. I think one of the things he did do very well is he kept running the ball, just knowing you need to have that balance. I think obviously a lot of the fanfare appropriately went to Gary Nova for his 400-plus yard game against Michigan, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. But I think a lot of the credit also goes to the fact that they tried to maintain some semblance of balance. I think it was about a 60-40 or 55-45, somewhere in that split by the end of the game. So I think they need to run the ball, they need to get 2-3 yards, make it manageable second downs, third downs, and go from there.
What are your concerns of Nova having another 5-interception game like the Penn State game?
Oh, that's a legitimate concern. Gary Nova certainly has driven the Rutgers fans mad over the past couple years with his up and down performances. Tremendous job last year in games against Arkansas. Big name opponents. SEC opponents that Rutgers had a home and home with. And then he'll go around and there'll be games where you literally don't know some of the decisions he's making, why he's making them. The confidence Rutgers fans would have is that Ralph Friedgen's by far and away the best offensive coordinator he's had. In Gary Nova's defense, he's been a starter since he was a true freshman. Split time then. He's had 4 different OCs in 4 years. Obviously, Friedgen's the most accomplished, and Rutgers fans are hoping that Gary Nova's good decisions will continue. But you never know. I think it's one of the reasons why Friedgen tries to establish and keep going with that ground game. You don't want to put too much weight on the quarterback's shoulders at any point.
I have a question about Rutgers' defensive line, and I have the utmost respect for Rutgers with, as Shannon mentioned, the pass rush. I mean, they're very quick, but I guess the question I would have is, do you have any concerns about not necessarily being the biggest defensive line? And what I mean by that is, for example, like Darius Hamilton, I think is about 260 pounds. I'm just like a random Rutgers player. So do you have any concerns that Ohio State is going to try to control the clock, dominate the line of scrimmage by just pounding and pounding, play after play?
I would think that's what Ohio State should do. I would think they should try to pound the ball, and then take their shots against Rutgers secondary. Rutgers front seven is the strength of the team, certainly not the strength of the defensive team. The concerns about guys being undersized is legitimate. You mentioned Hamilton, who's a 3 technique, there's no way he weighs 270. He probably weighs 260. The nose tackle that they rotate in there, they're the high 280s, 290s, whatever Kirksey, whoever comes in for him. The defensive ends aren't very big. Kumoko Ture, who leads the Big Ten in sacks with 5.5 still, he's a maybe 235, 240-pound defensive end. He's just an athletic freak. He's the one who you guys know who had those blocked field goals against Penn State and against Michigan. So they do it with scheme. They also do it with pressure. There were times that what was that the third down play Michigan had against Rutgers, where it was 3rd and 9. There was that questionable call on the sidelines. Rutgers brought 7, and they'll bring 6 and bring 7 if they feel like they need to. And hopefully get to the quarterback, force them into a bad decision. They'll take that gamble. But certainly the ground game, I think, is going to be the concern. If the Ohio State's offensive line is able to get that push, that could keep the Rutgers defensive line on the field a long time, and that could be a problem, because one of the strengths of the defensive line is they do rotate 8 guys on the D line. That's one of the reasons why I think they've able to be so successful.
The other question I had, as it relates to Rutgers, it kind of transcends this game, but it's more of a long-term thing, is with Rutgers joining the Big Ten and New Jersey being such a fertile recruiting area for, obviously, for years, Ohio State has tried to get talent from New Jersey, Penn State. Do you have any concerns? Obviously, you can't speak for the entire fan base, but do you have any concerns about, any more of the New Jersey talent being, for lack of a better word, stolen away to programs like Ohio State, away from Rutgers?
Certainly, that is a concern. The only reason why the Rutgers fans aren't as concerned as I think people might expect is it's been going on already. Jersey kids rarely, although it happens, they rarely choose SEC schools. The New Jersey kids who are the better players who have left the state have been already picking the Big Ten schools plus Notre Dame. Those are the usual choices. Every once in a while you have somebody pick if you can get into Stanford, you get into Stanford, hats off. But pick a West Coast Pac-12 school. But those are rare. You mentioned Ohio State, Michigan, Notre Dame, and certainly Penn State. They've been the ones who have been Rutgers' biggest competitors for the in-state kids already. So I think that's where Rutgers fans aren't as concerned as they might be. It's hurt them in the 2015 class, but I think what hurt them more in the 2015 class was the insecurity surrounding Kyle Flood coming off of last year's disappointing year. 2 years ago he was named the Big East Coach of the Year with Charlie Strong. Obviously, there's no shame in that. And then last year was a highly disappointing year. He did get an extension to start off this year before the Penn State game. He got a contract extension, which I think eased some of the concerns. So Rutgers fans are hoping that the recruiting turns around a lot of talent in New Jersey in 2016. But the concerns you raised certainly are legitimate. I just think that those have already been Rutgers competitors for the better kids in state. Have been the Big Ten teams plus Notre Dame.
I have to ask you, Sal. I had a question. You brought Ralph Friesen earlier. I know we talked about him briefly a few weeks ago with our Maryland writer we brought on, our guest Michael Willis, and they definitely, I think they definitely missed the fridge up there in Maryland. You talked about how he's really helped out the offense. Describe the impact he's had, not just on the offense, but Gary Nova, because Nova, I know, is having a career season. His interceptions are way down, and he's on pace to set a record for a personal record for most touchdowns during the season. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah. The whole thing. I mean, you guys are obviously as college football fans. If hiring a Friesen coming off of the ACC Coach of the Year, was already an interesting choice, and hiring a guy who came from UConn who really had one good year. No offense to Randy Edsall, he did a good job at UConn, but you had someone who was already established. Rutgers fans were elated when we found out that Ralph Friesen was going to be coaching Rutgers. He is probably the most accomplished coach that Rutgers has ever had, including Kyle Flood and Greg Schiano. He obviously brings a resume where he's coached offensive coordinator at Georgia Tech when they were national champions, the San Diego Chargers in the NFL in the Super Bowl. Brought, as you guys know, of course, Maryland to the Orange Bowl. I think it was 2003. So obviously his resume speaks for itself. The difference is really night and day between the offense last year, where Ron Prince was running the offense, and Ralph Friesen this year. Gary Nova's decision making, as you point out, has been much better. It wasn't good against Penn State, but I also think that his numbers were a little bit inflated with some receivers making some mistakes too. He threw 5 interceptions against Penn State. 2 were clearly his. 1 bounced off the helmet of a wide receiver. I mean, it's hard to blame the quarterback when the ball hits the receiver in the helmet. One was a hot read where Paul James, we spoke about, he just didn't turn around fast enough when they're bringing pressure. And then one's the end of the game. You want to call that third one his, that's fine. But, it's 4th and 16, the end of the game. He throws it up, it gets picked off. Outside of that game, he's been much better. The decision-making has been important. And, Nova has repeatedly said what Friedgen's brought to the table more than anything else is his ability to teach, and not just teach quarterback play, but teach defenses. Nova and all the quarterbacks have said they feel they understand defenses so much more now than they ever had before. And Ralph Friedgen has preached that he gives the quarterbacks a lot of flexibility. Gary Nova will go to line with more than one option, and you'll see him calling out audibles at the line. Friedgen is confident in his own abilities to entrust Gary Nova to make the right decision at the line based off of the offense that he sees. And to me, he was one of the unheralded reasons why they were running the ball so well early on in the year too. Because he's changing the play at the line of scrimmage regularly to put Paul James and the running backs in the best position they can to succeed. And if he's able to keep doing that going forward, I think Rutgers is going to continue to build on what's certainly already been a successful season for Rutgers.
I have a speculation question for you. And again, I don't want to try and put you in the position of answering for the entire Rutgers fan base.
I can do it. Don't worry.
Okay. You look like you have very strong, sturdy shoulders. So
yeah, at this point I have to.
All right. So here's the speculation question: is that years ago, when Greg Schiano was the head coach at Rutgers, he had the opportunity to interview with the University of Michigan, did not pursue that. So the speculation is, in the event that Michigan were to part ways with Brady Hoke and possibly contact Greg Schiano and bring him back to the Big Ten, what would I'll put it on you. How would you respond to Greg Schiano returning to the Big Ten at Michigan, facing Rutgers on a year-in, year-out basis?
First, I don't think I'm the majority with this statement. I think it would be great for Rutgers from the fact that there'd be a rivalry right away. I mean, that game would be very intense. It would be exciting. Rutgers fans would be into it. That would be the positive. The downside is Greg Schiano can recruit. There was plenty of questions about some of his game decisions. He runs a very tight ship, which with certain groups doesn't always resonate.
Like Tampa Bay.
Like Tampa Bay. That coaching decision hasn't seemed to work out so well for the Bucks down there, this year either. That's why I don't know if he is the right fit for Michigan. But if they want to pursue him, the concern to Rutgers fans would be the recruiting. He has great connections within New Jersey. He was a New Jersey guy. He prided himself on turning around Rutgers and did a tremendous job with that. I'd be surprised if Michigan pursues him. If they did, there certainly be a lot of concern and also some reason for excitement too. You get the pupil versus the teacher type write-ups when Flood and Schiano will go head to head. So I think from that angle, it would be exciting to see happen. I also think Rutgers fans, if they could choose to have him back, Rutgers fans are pretty split on that. So I don't think there'd be a lot of Rutgers fans who were overly disappointed that he wasn't coaching Rutgers. Rutgers fans certainly are appreciative of him getting Rutgers to a certain spot, but many of them feel like there's very few coaches who can stay for so many years without wearing out their welcome. The message gets old, and even the most successful ones. I think Rutgers fans are fine going a different direction as well.
I'm glad you asked that, Chip. I never thought of that, asking about Schiano. I think he could definitely be a top candidate if they're able to land one of the harder balls. But we could go into a whole discussion about that situation in Ann Arbor. You guys get to the thoughts and score predictions on this game. We'll start with you, Sal. How do you think this game's got to play out in your final score prediction?
Yeah. I don't know if I've thought of the final score prediction yet, but I'll think it out as we talk here. Ohio State's the better team. I do think they're going to have some success running the ball, more than Rutgers has seen in a while. If Rutgers, like I said, is going to pull the upset, they're going to need some things to go their way. I do think, as you guys said, they'll get to the passer a little bit better than expected. The question is how many chances they're going to have to do that. They need to get the second and longs to happen, and that's when Rutgers can make some hay with the pass rush. I'd like to think the game is competitive in the third quarter, And in the end, I think Ohio State wins, 2+ touchdowns, somewhere in the – Ohio State's going to score some points, somewhere in the 31 to 17 range. I could see something like that, Hank, where I'd like to see, a competitive game in the third quarter, close enough at halftime.
Andrew, your final score prediction, thoughts on the game?
I think Buckeyes continue momentum, and I think they get going early like they did against Maryland, and the defense holds up with the secondary improving every game. And I think Buckeyes pull this one out 41-17.
Chip, your thoughts on this game and final score prediction?
Well, I want to thank Sal for joining us. I thought he gave us a lot of tremendous insight on Rutgers and the direction of the program. I think this is it really depends on Ezekiel Elliott and Ohio State being able to establish the run, kind of what I asked Sal earlier. So I'm going to say that Ohio State, they're going to win this one in the second half just by kind of a war of attrition. I'm going to say like a 42-21 game.
Shannon, your thoughts?
I want to thank Sal for coming and joining us, and hopefully you can stay with us a little bit afterwards because I want to talk to all you guys. I'm hoping that with Curtis Samuels coming back and Eli Apple, having the roots and having them ties with Rutgers and being recruited by Rutgers, wanting to show something, they're going to have, maybe a big game, but I think it's going to be kind of close. I'm going 34-21 Ohio State.
Yeah, my personal thoughts, I think this game will play out very similar to the Cincinnati game. I think it'll be very close for 2 quarters. It'll put a scare in the Buckeyes, and like they've been doing in all their games this season, the Buckeyes have done a great job adjusting in the second half to the other team's strengths. I think Nova will have a big first half, but they'll be able to shut down the running game for Rutgers. Ohio State will get that running game going with Ezekiel Elliott. So I'm going to take the Buckeyes in this one, something like 49-27, something like that. I think the offense will be the Buckeye offense will be too good for Rutgers to stop, but I think Rutgers will put up a very good fight for 2.5 quarters. So that's our final scores, predictions, and thoughts on the Ohio State-Rutgers game as we sign off here. Get our final thoughts here. Thank everybody out there for listening in to Minnesota and Gray Live. I hear feedback from people every day. You guys hear as well. Very appreciative of that. Of course, you can subscribe to us on iTunes by typing in MotSaG Live in the search box. It'll come right up. And, of course, we have a link right on the site, MinnesotaandGray.com. So I'm sure to subscribe through that. You can also subscribe through Android, through Pocket Cast app. Very handy app Shannon uses. And get your guys' final thoughts here before we wrap up the show. We'll start with you, Andrew. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, sure. I'm looking forward to another good weekend of college football. It seems there's just every week is just getting getting better and better, these games. And, I'm looking forward to the Buckeyes playing Rutgers, and should be a good weekend of college football. And thanks to everybody for listening. We appreciate it. And thank you, Sal, for joining us.
Chip, your final thoughts?
Well, again, thanks to Sal for joining us. Thanks to everyone that's listening. Looking forward to echo Andrew's comments, another great weekend of college football, and hoping that Ohio State leaves Saturday afternoon with a victory over our new member Rutgers.
Shannon, your final thoughts?
Yeah, very appreciative of everybody listening and supporting us. It means a lot to us. And, again, thankful for Sal joining us. And if anybody has any questions they want to ask us, don't forget to you can email us at motsag@gmail.com or use a Twitter hashtag MotSAG on Twitter.
Yes, thank you. I want to reiterate what everyone else said, Sal. We're very thankful for having you on the show. Sal Soothsayer, you can follow him on Twitter at Sal Soothsayer, and you can go to his website, salsoothsayer.com. Sal, very thankful to have you on. We're looking forward to our first game against Rutgers. We're, again, very thankful to have you on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it. It was a good chat, and I can assure you too. The Rutgers fan base is thrilled to be in the Big Ten. From the moment it was announced, the fans were elated over it. There was no concern, should we stay in our conference like, some other teams may have had. One of the goals of the Rutgers fans was to make the Big Ten proud. So I know the Rutgers fans are very proud of the win over Washington State and the out-of-conference schedule, and getting a win over Michigan, I'm sure impresses the Ohio State fans as well too. We're always trying to make sure that we're trying to make the Big Ten proud. I know the Rutgers fans would be wanting me to mention that too. Looking forward to a game on ABC, which for you guys is commonplace at 3:30, but not so common for Rutgers.
Yeah, well, storming the field after playing Michigan, that. Yeah, I don't know about doing all that.
I don't think it was so much the Michigan win as it was the first ever Big Ten win, but I certainly can understand that.
I'm glad to hear Rutgers fans are very proud to be in the Big Ten. I love to hear that because we're all very Big Ten proud here, and we want to all see the conference succeed and do well and get ESPN to shut the heck up about us, dogging us all the time. So, again, thank you for joining us, Sal, here on MotSaG Live. We're going to wrap up the show now. Thanks, everybody, for watching. And tune in next week, same time, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. And Shannon, as always, hit the music as we always play out with.
Go Bucks!
Go Bucks!
Good luck.
People are getting fired in Michigan soon.